Victoria didn't know that the woman scrubbing marble floors in the gallery room had once testified before Congress. She didn't know that Nia Adebayo had exposed an 11 million fraud that powerful senators had tried to bury, or that the crumpled child's drawing in the trash can beside her would be the final mistake. All Victoria knew was that her champagne gown cost more than this maid would earn in a year. She was wrong. The Apex Club gleamed with the kind of wealth that didn't apologize. Floor-to-ceiling windows turned Lake Michigan into liquid gold. Contemporary art hung on dark wood paneling. 12 major pieces worth millions. 3 belonging to tonight's guest of honor. Crystal caught candle light at every turn. Everywhere there were eyes, none of them kind. "You missed a spot," Victoria said, her Louis Vuitton heel tapping marble 6 inches from Nia's gloved hand. "Right there by my shoe." Nia kept scrubbing. The ammonia solution burned her nostrils. Her knees ached against hard marble despite the foam pads. 6 years of this work had taught her that showing pain only invited more of it. "I'll take care of it, drive. Langston. See that you do." Victoria smoothed her champagne silk gown, diamonds at her throat catching firelight like frozen stars. Everything about her screamed success, from the sleek waves of her hair to the Cartier watch glinting at her wrist. "I'm announcing a 90 million donation tonight. The largest gift to the Art Institute by a black donor in history. Everything must be perfect. Not made perfect, actually perfect." The words landed exactly as intended. Nia felt them press against old wounds. "I understand, ma'am. Do you?" Victoria tilted her head, studying Nia the way someone might examine something stuck to their shoe. "I suppose you must understand cleaning. At least it's what you do, what you are." She walked away in a rustle of expensive fabric, leaving Nia alone on floors polished to mirror brightness. But Nia's eyes had already tracked to the documents Victoria left on the presentation table. Qualified appraisal. Langston Art Fund, 90 million. Business address, 251 Little Falls Drive, Wilmington, Delaware. That address, Corporation Service Company, Shell Companies, the same address she'd traced in the Harrington case 6 years ago when she'd been someone who mattered. Victoria had no idea who she'd just dismissed. Nia's phone buzzed during her 15-minute break. The vibration loud in the industrial quiet of the service corridor. She pulled off her rubber gloves, fingers wrinkled and chemical raw, and read the text from Jamal. "Aisha's school called Fever 101. They want immediate pickup. I'm 40 minutes away on the site. Can you go?" Her chest tightened. She typed back with hands that wanted to shake. "Working until 8. Can't leave without termination." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Appeared again. "I'll lose the overtime. We needed those hours." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. She's our daughter. Heading there now." Nia closed her eyes and leaned against the gray concrete wall. Aisha was 12, old enough to be brave, but young enough to be scared. And Nia couldn't go to her because missing a shift at the Apex Club meant a write-up. And 3 write-ups meant losing the job that barely kept them afloat. She had a law degree from Georgetown, a CPA certification, 6 years of experience on the IRS Art Advisory Panel where she'd specialized in tracing money through the kinds of corporate structures that made wealthy people believe they were untouchable. And she was trapped in a service corridor, choosing between her daughter and a paycheck that wouldn't cover both their rent and her mother's memory care facility. She pushed off the wall, pulled her gloves back on, returned to the gallery room, where marble floors gleamed like judgment, and art worth millions hung on walls she wasn't supposed to touch. Her cleaning cart sat where she'd left it, supplies organized with the same precision she'd once used to organize evidence for federal prosecutors. And tucked in the supply basket beneath the microfiber cloths and spray bottles was Lila's drawing. 8 years old, done in purple crayon with the fierce concentration only children possess. A stick figure in a graduation gown. Careful letters. "My mommy is the smartest." A sun taking up half the page because Lila believed everything good deserved to be enormous. Aisha had asked her to bring it to the hospital if things got worse. "It'll make you feel brave, Mama, like you used to be." Nia pulled out her phone, opened the browser. Old habits surfacing like bodies in a flood. She typed Langston Art Fund Donation Art Institute Chicago. The press release loaded. 90 million. 12 major works by black artists. 5 separate donor entities contributing to the gift. Her fingers moved faster now. A Delaware division of corporation's public database. She entered the first entity, Langston Holdings LLC. Beneficial owner, Drive, Victoria Langston. Second entity, Lee Family Trust. Beneficial owner, Drive, Victoria Langston. Third, fourth, fifth, all the same. All her. Nia's pulse kicked up. She pulled up the Corporate Transparency Act database, the tool that had revolutionized fraud detection when it took effect. January 1, 2024. Before this law, shell companies could hide their owners indefinitely. Now, every LLC had to disclose beneficial ownership. The actual humans behind the corporate veil. And Victoria had no idea the rules had changed. 10 minutes of searching told Nia everything. Circular provenance. The same painting sold between entities Victoria controlled. Each transfer inflating the price. Now wire transfers that circled back to the same Cayman accounts. Appraisals completed in 48 hours by a company registered to a mail drop. The Kahindi Way portrait claimed value $8.2 million. Actual comparable auction sales $2.4 million. Total fraud $23.53 million in false tax deductions. The exact same structure as the Harrington case. The case that had destroyed her career when she'd refused to let powerful people bury it. Nia could report this quietly. Email the IRS. Let them handle it. Stay invisible and safe. Her phone buzzed. Jamal. Aisha's okay. Little warm but smiling. Says she wants her drawing if you can bring it later. The one that makes you remember. Nia looked at the drawing in her cart. At the purple graduation gown, at her daughter's belief that her mother was smart past tense before she'd become invisible. She tucked the drawing carefully into her uniform pocket and went back to scrubbing floors while evidence of fraud sat 20 feet away on a presentation table. For now. Just for now. Until she decided whether remembering who she used to be was worth the cost of becoming visible again. At 7, Victoria returned to the gallery room with her assistant, a nervous young white woman named Emily, who looked like she'd been hired for her ability to nod at appropriate intervals. Nia was polishing the presentation table, working around the documents Victoria had left scattered across its surface. "Is this your work area?" Victoria gestured at Nia's cleaning cart with the kind of dismissive wave usually reserved for flies. "Yes, ma'am. I'm nearly finished with the room. Move it immediately. Guests begin arriving in 30 minutes, and I will not have cleaning supplies visible in my event space." Nia straightened, her lower back screaming in protest. "Of course, I'll just now." The word cut like glass. Nia pushed the cart toward the service entrance, moving quickly, professionally, the way she'd learned to move through wealthy spaces, fast enough to show deference, slow enough not to appear panicked. Victoria's heel caught the cart's wheel as she turned to speak to Emily. The cart tipped. Bottles crashed against marble. Cleaning solution flooded across the floor in a chemical-smelling wave. And Lila's drawing, the precious, carefully preserved drawing, fell out of the supply basket and landed directly in the puddle of ammonia solution. "What is this?" Victoria bent down, picking up the soaked paper by one corner, her nose wrinkling in distaste. "Children's artwork. You brought children's artwork into my event space." "That's my daughter's." Nia reached for it, but Victoria pulled it back. "Please, it's important. This is completely unprofessional." Victoria's voice carried across the gallery room. Emily shifted uncomfortably. A server setting up the bar turned to look. Bringing personal items to work, cluttering premium event spaces with. She glanced at the ruined paper. Purple crayon bleeding into chemicals, crayon scribbles. She crumpled it. The motion was deliberate, performative. Then she dropped it into the nearby trash can with a gesture that said, "This is where garbage belongs." Perhaps this will teach you the difference between a workplace and a daycare center. Now clean up this mess you've made and remove your cart from my sight. She swept away, Emily hurrying after her, leaving Nia standing in a puddle of spilled cleaning solution, staring at the trash can. The gallery room was silent except for the distant sound of the kitchen. The clink of glasses being arranged. The world continuing as if nothing had happened, as if Victoria hadn't just destroyed the one thing Nia's daughter had made to help her mother remember who she used to be. Nia pulled the drawing from the trash. The paper was soaked through, disintegrating in her hands. Purple crayon bled across the graduation gown. The sun Lila had drawn so carefully was dissolving into chemical streaks. The words, "My mommy is the smartest," were barely legible. Something inside Nia that had been carefully controlled for 6 years cracked open. Not the part that had learned to survive by staying small and quiet and invisible. Not the part that had accepted humiliation as the price of employment. The part that remembered federal courtrooms, congressional testimony. Truth delivered with surgical precision to people who thought power made them untouchable. She carefully folded the ruined drawing, tucked it into her uniform pocket, cleaned up the spilled solution with hands that didn't shake because she'd learned long ago how to function while rage burned underneath. Then she pulled out her phone and opened her email, found the contact she'd kept for 6 years without ever using. Alex Kim, Senior Criminal Investigator, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the only person who'd believed her evidence against Harrington, who told her privately that burying her case had been political cowardice. She typed, "Alex, it's Nia Adebayo. I have a case. Art donation fraud, 23.5 million in fraudulent deductions. Corporate Transparency Act makes it airtight. Sending evidence files now. Need you to run backup analysis. Announcement happening tonight at 900 p.m. Apex Club Chicago." She has no idea the law changed. She has no idea who she just humiliated. She attached everything. Formation documents, beneficial ownership records, wire transfer patterns, auction comparables, the systematic fraud laid bare in spreadsheets and database screenshots. Then she hit send. Her phone buzzed immediately. "Alex, holy, this is solid. Really solid on it now. You coming back?" Nia looked at the gallery room, at the art worth millions hanging on walls she'd scrubbed, at the presentation table where Victoria would stand in 2 hours and announce her gift to Chicago. At the trash can where her daughter's love letter had been thrown away like it meant nothing. She typed back, "I never left. I was just hiding. Not anymore." She had 2 hours before the announcement. 2 hours to finish her shift, change out of her maid's uniform, and become the forensic accountant who'd once made powerful people very, very afraid. Victoria wanted perfect. She was about to get exactly that. A perfect investigation, a perfect case, a perfect reckoning delivered by the woman she dismissed as nothing more than someone who scrubbed her floors. At 8:30, Nia stood in the employee locker room, staring at her reflection. Her navy housekeeping uniform, hair pulled back in a functional bun, face exhausted from a double shift. This was who Victoria had seen, who everyone saw. She pulled the ruined drawing from her pocket, unfolded it carefully. The purple crayon had bled into abstract streaks, but she could still make out the words if she looked carefully enough. "My mommy is the smartest." Her phone buzzed. "Jamal, Aisha's fever broke. She's asking about the drawing. Should I tell her what happened?" "No. Tell her I'm using it for something important, something that matters." "You okay?" "I'm remembering who I am." She stripped off the uniform, pulled on the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks and a white button-down she'd bought 6 years ago for her last job interview. They still fit barely. She'd lost weight these past years, the kind of weight that comes from choosing between groceries and utility bills. From her locker, she pulled out a folder she'd kept tucked behind her spare uniform. Inside, her bar from DC, still active because she'd never been able to let it lapse completely, her CPA certificate, a printed copy of her CV from before everything fell apart, and at the bottom, a laminated ID badge. Nia Adebayo, Senior Forensic Accountant, IRS Art Advisory Panel. She'd kept it all these years. Through everything, she'd kept it. She clipped it to her shirt, looked at herself in the mirror again. Same face, same exhaustion, but different somehow, visible. Her phone buzzed again. Alex Kim confirmed everything. Wire transfers show circular movement through payment accounts. Formation dates prove coordinated fraud. The auction comps support your valuation analysis. This is Harrington 2.0. Better actually. You've got the Corporate Transparency Act. Now that's the smoking gun. Criminal referral filed. Field agents will be there within the hour. Then another message. Why are you really doing this? You know it'll blow back on you again. They'll remember you're the one who doesn't stay quiet. Nia typed. Because a woman who looks like me, who came from where I came from, just threw my daughter's artwork in the trash and told me I should know my place. Because I spent 6 years learning to be invisible and I'm done. Because if I don't stop her, who will? Fair enough. Give them hell, Nia. She left the locker room and took the service elevator up to the gallery room level. When the doors opened, she could hear music. Conversation. The gala had begun. She stepped into the corridor. A server passed carrying champagne flutes. Did a double take seeing Nia in street clothes instead of her uniform, but said nothing. Nia walked toward the gallery room entrance, toward the sound of wealth and power, toward the woman who dismissed her as nothing. Her hands didn't shake. Her pulse was steady. This was what she'd trained for. This was who she'd been before fear had taught her to hide. She pulled out her phone one more time, opened her photo gallery, found the picture Jamal had sent earlier. Aisha in her hospital bed holding up a drawing she'd made while waiting for her fever to break. Another stick figure. Another graduation gown. New words. My mommy is still the smartest. Present tense, not past. Still. Nia tucked her phone away and walked into the gallery room where 300 of Chicago's wealthiest had gathered to witness what they thought would be a historic act of philanthropy. They were right about the historic part, just not the way they expected. The gallery room had transformed since Nia had scrubbed its floors hours earlier. Crystal glassware caught candlelight like stars. Servers glided between tables carrying trays of appetizers that cost more than Nia's weekly paycheck. The art on the walls seemed to glow, spotlit and precious. 300 guests in evening wear clustered in groups, their jewelry catching light, their laughter bright and careless. Nia stood at the back near the service entrance watching. No one looked at her. No one saw her. She wasn't in uniform, but she also wasn't wearing silk or diamonds or the invisible armor of wealth that made you matter in spaces like this. At the front of the room, Victoria held court at the center table, surrounded by admirers. Her champagne gown caught every eye. Dr. Elizabeth Harlan sat beside her. The Art Institute's director, elegant in black, preparing to accept the gift that would transform her museum's contemporary wing. A gift built on fraud. Nia pulled out her phone, sent one last message to Alex. I'm here, ready when you are. Agents are 2 minutes out. You sure about this? Once you step into that room, there's no going back to invisible. Good. I'm tired of hiding. The lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the presentation area. An MC in a black cocktail dress stepped to the microphone. Her voice bright with professional enthusiasm. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome Drive Victoria Langston, CEO of Langston Art Fund, and tonight's distinguished guest. Applause filled the room. People rose to their feet, standing ovation before she'd even spoken. Victoria walked to the microphone, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, who'd never been stopped, who'd convinced herself that excellence erased obligation. Nia had felt that way once before. She'd learned that being right didn't protect you when powerful people wanted you silent. Thank you, Victoria said, her voice carrying easily across the room. Thank you so much. Tonight represents something I've dreamed about since I was a child growing up on Chicago's South Side. She paused, letting the room settle into attentive silence. Nia recognized the technique. Create space. Make them wait. Make the words matter more. My mother taught art at Dunbar High School for 32 years. My father taught history at Englewood. They didn't have wealth, but they had vision. They believed that art belonged to everyone, not just people who could afford private collections. They believed that cultural heritage should be accessible, celebrated, shared. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Dr. Harlan was nodding. So, tonight I'm honored to announce a $90 million donation to the Art Institute of Chicago. Gasps, more applause, phones emerging to capture the moment. 12 major works by Black artists whose genius has too often been marginalized or erased. Kehinde Way, Julie Meritou, Beaufort Delaney, Amy Sherald. These artists tell our stories and they center our experiences. They demand that institutions acknowledge Black excellence as essential, not supplemental. The applause built. Victoria smiled, soaking it in. And I'm deeply moved to share that the Art Institute has agreed to name the new contemporary wing the Langston Gallery of Cultural Excellence. Dr. Harlan stood, moving toward the microphone to formalize the acceptance. Nia stepped forward out of the shadows into the light. Dr. Langston, she said, her voice cutting through the applause like a blade through silk. I need to speak with you about that donation before drive. Harlan accepts it. The room went silent. Every head turned. Victoria's expression shifted through confusion, recognition, something that might have been fear. Security, she started. My name is Nia Adebayo. Nia kept walking toward the front of the room, her footsteps loud in the sudden quiet. I'm a forensic accountant, former senior analyst with the IRS Art Advisory Panel. And your $90 million donation is built on systematic fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. Nia could hear her own heartbeat. The rustle of expensive fabric as people shifted in their seats. The clink of someone's champagne flute hitting a table too hard. This is absurd, Victoria said, recovering her composure. Her voice carried that particular authority that came from years of being believed without question. Security, please remove this woman. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Nia reached the front of the room, standing 10 feet from Victoria, close enough to see the muscles tighten in her jaw. IRS Criminal Investigation has agents on their way to this location right now. They'll want to know why you tried to silence someone presenting evidence of federal tax fraud. Dr. Harlan had frozen mid-step, her hand halfway to Victoria's. Evidence of what? Tax fraud, approximately $23.53 million worth. Nia pulled out her phone, pulled up the files she'd compiled. Your 5 donor entities, Langston Holdings, Lee Family Trust, Meridian Art Investments, VCA Partners, Langston Foundation. They're all registered to the same beneficial owner under the Corporate Transparency Act, Drive. Victoria Langston. Murmurs erupted. Phones came out, people frantically searching the terms Nia was using. That's not fraud, Victoria said. But her voice had lost some of its certainty. Multiple entities can contribute to a single gift, they can. But when all 5 entities are owned by the same person, and those entities have been selling artwork to each other in circular transactions designed to inflate valuations, that's called circular provenance fraud. Nia's voice was clinical now, stripped of emotion. This was what she'd been trained for. The Kehinde Way portrait you're donating. You claim it's worth $8.2 million. Your acquisition records from 2019 show you purchased it for $1.8 million. She pulled up the documentation on her phone, held it so the nearby tables could see. Then in 2021, Langston Holdings sold it to Lee Family Trust for $3.2 million. In 2023, Lee Family Trust sold it to Meridian Art Investments for $5.4 million. Last year, Meridian sold it to VCA Partners for $8.2 million, 4 sales, escalating prices, creating false market history. Dr. Harlan was reading over Nia's shoulder now, her face draining of color. Except all those wire transfers, Nia continued. They came from Cayman National Bank accounts that trace back to you. The money moved in a circle. You were selling the painting to yourself, creating paperwork that made it look like independent buyers were driving up the price. That's fraud. A woman in the front row, Victoria's lawyer, Nia recognized the expensive suit and the predatory watchfulness, stood abruptly, phone already at her ear. The same pattern repeats across every major piece in your donation, Nia said. Actual fair market value based on recent comparable auction sales, 26.4 million. Claimed value, 90 million. Inflation rate 341%. She let that number sit. At the highest federal tax bracket, 90 million in charitable deductions saves you 33.3 million in taxes. The actual legitimate deduction would be 9.77 million. The difference, 23.53 million, is stolen from federal revenue, from schools, infrastructure, programs that serve communities like the one you claim to be honoring tonight. Victoria's hands gripped the podium so hard her knuckles went pale. You have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a-respected. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Nia's voice was quiet now, but it carried. 6 years ago, I exposed an $11.9 million art fraud case involving a senator's brother-in-law, and the case was buried. I was blacklisted from my field. I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my ability to work in the profession I'd spent 12 years building. She paused, letting that sink in. So, I became a maid. I scrubbed the floors in this room for 4 hours this afternoon while you prepared for this announcement. You told me I should understand cleaning because it's what I do, what I am. Victoria's face had gone rigid. But cleaning floors didn't erase my law degree from Georgetown. It didn't erase my CPA certification or my experience on the IRS Art Advisory Panel. It just made me invisible to people like you. Nia pulled out the ruined drawing from her pocket, held it up, purple crayon bleeding into chemical stains. This is what my 8-year-old daughter made for me to help me remember who I used to be. You threw it in the trash tonight and told me it was garbage. That I was unprofessional for bringing it to work. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Not quite guilt, but recognition. I could have reported this quietly, Nia continued. But you needed to understand something. The woman scrubbing your floors. She's the same woman who helped write the guidelines the IRS now uses to detect exactly this kind of fraud. The Corporate Transparency Act you didn't know about. I beta tested that database, and the agent reviewing my evidence right now, he's someone I've worked with for a decade. She looked directly at Victoria. You thought being excellent meant you'd transcended obligation. That success gave you permission to dismiss people you saw as beneath you. But I'm standing here to tell you that excellence without integrity is just performance, and your performance is over. Dr. Harlan stepped away from the microphone, her voice sharp with institutional self-preservation. The Art Institute cannot accept a donation with questionable provenance or fraudulent valuations. We'll require independent verification before we even consider proceeding. Translation: this deal is dead, and we're protecting ourselves from liability. Victoria's lawyer had reached her now, whispering urgently. But Victoria wasn't listening. She was staring at Nia with an expression that cycled through shock, rage, and something that might have been recognition. How did you? She started, then stopped. Started again. I checked. I had my accountants verify everything. Yeah, the structure was sound. The structure was sound in 2019. Nia said before the Corporate Transparency Act took effect January 1, 2024. Before the FinCEN beneficial ownership database went live, before shell companies had to disclose who actually owned them. She pulled up another screen on her phone. Your appraiser, Drive, Harrison Wellesley, Wellesley Fine Art Valuations LLC. Formation date, March 3. Appraisal date, March 5. 48 hours. No legitimate appraiser completes a 90 million valuation in 48 hours. The address, Drive, Harlan said quietly, reading over Nia's shoulder. 251 Little Falls Drive. That's Corporation Service Company. Nia confirmed a registered agent service. Essentially a mail drop for companies that want a Delaware address without maintaining a physical office. Your appraiser doesn't exist. It's a shell company you created to rubber stamp the valuations you needed. The room had erupted in whispers. Now, Victoria's lawyer was pulling at her arm, trying to get her to stop talking, but Victoria shook her off. You're the Thornwood maid, she said suddenly. I hired housekeeping from the Thornwood Estate Agency 3 months ago. You came with excellent references. I did, Nia said, because I'm excellent at my job. All of my jobs, including the one where I catch people like you. Something cracked in Victoria's expression. Then, not the polished veneer of success that had already shattered, something deeper. The realization that she'd dismissed someone who held the power to destroy everything she'd built. Why? Victoria's voice was barely audible. Why are you doing this? Because you asked me if I understood cleaning. Nia's voice was steady, and I wanted you to understand something in return. The people you dismiss, the ones you treat as invisible because they serve you food or clean your spaces or deliver your packages. Some of them are carrying expertise you can't imagine. Some of them are one phone call away from destroying everything you think makes you untouchable. She paused. And because my daughter drew me in a graduation gown and you threw it in the trash. Because you needed to learn that cruelty has consequences, even when you think you're too powerful to face them. The doors at the back of the gallery room opened. 3 people in dark suits entered. 2 men and a woman, all carrying credentials that identified them as IRS criminal investigation agents. But Alex Kim was in the lead, his expression professional, but with a slight nod toward Nia that said, I told you I'd have your back. Dr. Victoria Langston, the female agent said, I'm Special Agent Morrison with IRS Criminal Investigation. We need to speak with you regarding your planned donation to the Art Institute. Victoria's lawyer stepped forward immediately. My client isn't answering questions we're not asking questions yet, Agent Morrison said calmly. We're informing Drive Langston that we have evidence of potentially fraudulent tax deductions related to charitable donations. We'd like her cooperation in our investigation. She looked at Nia. Miss Adebayo, thank you for your notification. Your analysis was extremely thorough. I had good training, Nia said. Victoria was staring at her now and really seeing her for the first time. Not the maid in the Navy uniform. The forensic accountant who just dismantled her empire in front of 300 witnesses. I'll cooperate, Victoria said suddenly. Her lawyer started to protest. But Victoria held up a hand. No, I'll cooperate because, she looked at Nia, because she's right about all of it. The room went silent again. I used methods that worked 5 years ago, Victoria continued, her voice hollow. I didn't know the law had changed. I didn't know the database existed. I didn't know that the invisible woman scrubbing my floors was the only person in Chicago who could recognize exactly what I was doing. She turned to Dr. Harlan. I withdraw the donation effective immediately and I'll work with the IRS to determine accurate valuations and appropriate penalties. Her lawyer looked like she wanted to faint. Agent Morrison nodded slowly. That's a good start, Drive Langston. We'll be in touch to schedule a formal interview. Victoria nodded. Then she looked back at Nia. Your daughter's drawing. I'm sorry. That was she stopped. There's no excuse for that. For any of it. Nia didn't respond. Just watched as Victoria walked toward the exit. Her lawyer and the agents following. The champagne gown that had seemed so triumphant an hour ago now looked like costume jewelry under harsh light. The room remained silent until the doors closed. Then the whispers exploded. Phones everywhere. People frantically typing. The story already spreading. Dr. Harlan approached Nia slowly. You said you were blacklisted 6 years ago for exposing fraud. Yes. And you've been working as a maid since then. Yes. That's Drive. Harlan stopped. That's unconscionable. The Art Institute has a senior compliance position open. We need someone who understands fraud detection, who can review donations before we accept them. Someone who can't be intimidated or bought. She pulled out a business card. $160,000 annual salary, full benefits, including coverage for family members. Nia took the card, stared at it. The number seemed impossible. More than she and Jamal earned combined in a year. Call me Monday, Drive. Harlan said. And Ms. Adebayo, thank you. You just saved this institution from a scandal that would have destroyed us. She walked away, leaving Nia alone at the front of the gallery room. Still holding her daughter's ruined drawing in one hand and a business card that represented a future she'd stopped believing in. Her phone buzzed. Jamal Aisha saw the news. Chicago Tribune already has the story. Former IRS analyst exposes 90 million art fraud while working as maid. She's so proud of you. We both are. Nia smiled, typed back. Tell her mommy used the drawing. Tell her it worked. Tell her I remembered. She looked at the gallery room one last time, at the floors she'd scrubbed, at the art she'd cleaned around, at the space where she'd been invisible for so long. Then she walked toward the exit, past the guests who were still whispering, past the servers who'd seen her in both uniforms, past the life she'd been living, and toward the one she'd just reclaimed. Not invisible anymore, not silent, not finished, just getting started. 3 days later, Nia sat across from Victoria in a coffee shop on the south side. Not the kind of place either of them would have chosen for a meeting. It was small, crowded, smelled like burnt espresso and old pastries, but it was neutral ground, and after everything, neutral felt necessary. Victoria looked different without the champagne gown and diamonds. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. The kind of stripped-down appearance that came from realizing performance didn't protect you. Thank you for meeting me, Victoria said, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like she needed something to hold on to. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Nia had her own coffee, black, the same way she'd drunk it through law school in her IRS years and all the time since. But you said you wanted to talk, so talk. Victoria took a breath. The IRS audit starts next week. My lawyers estimate the civil penalties will be around 8.7 million. No criminal charges since I withdrew the donation before it was formally accepted. And I'm cooperating fully. That's the right outcome. I'm stepping down as CEO of Langston Art Fund. The board is appointing new leadership. Victoria's voice was steady but hollow. I'm also selling my personal collection, the actual legitimate pieces properly valued, using the proceeds to establish a fund for arts education in Chicago public schools. Nia waited. I want to name it after our mothers, Victoria continued. The Beatrice Langston and Fatima Adebayo Arts Education Fund, 5 million independently administered, priority funding for Southside and Westside schools. Why? Because you were right about everything. Victoria set down her coffee cup. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about what you said. That excellence without integrity is just performance. That dismissing people doesn't make you superior. That the people I treated as invisible were carrying expertise I couldn't imagine. She paused. And I kept thinking about your daughter's drawing, the one I destroyed. My mother, my real mother, Beatrice, she taught art at Dunbar for 32 years. She kept every drawing her students ever gave her. Boxes and boxes of them in her apartment. I used to think it was hoarding. Now I understand it was love. Recognition, seeing value in something others dismissed. Nia felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't there yet, but recognition. The daughter of a teacher who'd forgotten what teaching meant. I grew up poor, Victoria continued. Southside, just like I said in my speech, my parents were teachers. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and I shared a room with my 2 sisters until I was 16. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So, you know what it's like. I know what it's like to want to never be poor again. So desperately that you'll do anything to prove you've transcended it, even destroy the values that got you there. Victoria's voice cracked. I became exactly the kind of person who would have dismissed my parents, who would have thrown away my little sister's artwork and told her she was garbage. She pulled something from her bag. A folder. Inside were documents, incorporation papers, board structure, grant guidelines. I need your help, Victoria said. Building the fund, making sure it actually reaches the schools that need it. Making sure I don't just create another performance of philanthropy to make myself feel better. Nia looked at the documents. They were good, thoughtful, real accountability structures built in. I'm taking the position at the Art Institute, she said. Senior Compliance Officer. I start Monday. I know. I saw the announcement. Victoria smiled slightly. It's the right role for you. You're going to change how institutions think about donation vetting. So, why do you need me for this? Because I need someone who won't let me lie to myself, who will tell me when I'm performing instead of actually helping. Victoria met Nia's eyes. And because our mothers knew each other 20 years ago, Southside Arts Coalition. I found old photos my mother kept. Your mother, Fatima, and mine worked together on a mural at Kenwood Academy. Nia's breath caught. I didn't know that, neither did I. I'd forgotten my mother's stories about the teachers she worked with, about the woman who taught English and loved poetry, who believed words could change lives. Victoria pulled out a photograph. 2 younger women, one with paint-stained hands, one holding a stack of papers, both smiling in front of a wall covered in bright colors. My mother wants to meet yours. Before, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Alzheimer's was a thief. It stole time. Nia took the photograph, looked at her mother, vibrant and whole, 30 years younger. Looked at Beatrice, who was still alive and whole and able to remember. Thursday, she said, 2 o'clock Sunrise Memory Care on King Drive. Bring your mother. Thank you. I'm not doing it for you, Nia said. I'm doing it because my mother deserves to see an old friend. Because she forgets so much now, but maybe this will help her remember something good. Victoria nodded. And the fund, will you help? Nia looked at the documents again. At the real structures, the genuine commitment to accountability. At the chance to make sure the money actually mattered. I'll help, she said. But I need you to understand something. If I find problems, if you start sliding back into performance instead of substance, I'll call it out publicly if necessary. I wouldn't want it any other way. They sat in silence for a moment as 2 daughters of teachers trying to figure out how to honor the women who'd raised them to be better than they'd become. Can I ask you something? Victoria said finally. How did you survive it? 6 years of being invisible, of scrubbing floors when you could have been testifying in federal court. How did you not break? Nia thought about that, about the nights she'd cried in the employee bathroom, about the mornings she'd wanted to give up, about Jamal holding her when she couldn't hold herself. About Aisha and Lila believing she was smart. Present tense even when she'd forgotten. I did break, she said quietly. I broke every day, but I had people who kept reminding me I was still whole underneath. And I had daughters who needed to see that being dismissed doesn't mean you're dismissible. She pulled out the ruined drawing from her pocket. She'd been carrying it since that night. The purple crayon was still visible if you looked carefully. The sun Lila had drawn bleeding into chemical stains, but still there. And I had this, she said, reminding me that someone saw me as the smartest person they knew. Past tense or not, that mattered more than anything else. Victoria looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then she said, I'm sorry I threw it away. I'm sorry I made you feel like you were nothing. I'm sorry I forgot that we're supposed to lift each other up, not stand on each other to climb higher. Nia nodded, tucked the drawing back in her pocket. Prove it, she said. Not with words, with the work. Show me you meant it. I will, Victoria said. I promise. They left the coffee shop separately, both heading back to lives that had fundamentally changed in the space of one evening. Both carrying the weight of what they'd done and what they'd learned. And both in different ways, trying to figure out how to become worthy of being their mother's daughters. Thursday afternoon, Nia sat in the visiting room at Sunrise Memory Care with her mother's hand in hers. Fatima was having what the nurses called a golden hour. One of those rare stretches when the fog lifted and she was present lucid herself. Baby girl, Fatima said, squeezing Nia's fingers. I heard what you did. Saw it on the news. My brilliant daughter. You remember. Nia's voice cracked. I remember enough. You stood up. You spoke truth just like I taught you. Fatima's eyes were clear, focused. I'm so proud of you. The door opened. Victoria entered with an older woman, 70-some, silver locks, paint-stained cardigan, eyes that held decades of teaching children to see beauty. Fatima. Beatrice's face lit up. Fatima Adebayo from Kenwood. Fatima's expression changed. Not confusion, recognition. Beatrice. Beatrice Langston. It's been 20 years. Beatrice crossed the room, pulled Fatima into a hug that both women leaned into like finding home. The mural, Fatima said. The Faces of Excellence mural. You painted it. My students wrote the poetry. They did. Beautiful poetry. I wonder if it's still there. I can't remember. Fatima's frustration flickered, but Beatrice held her hand. It's okay, but we'll remember together. Nia and Victoria stood back, watching their mothers bridge 2 decades and dementia with the ease of people who'd once believed in the same things. I visited her yesterday, Victoria said quietly. My mother, first time in months. She didn't ask where I'd been, just made tea and showed me her teaching scrapbooks. Mine doesn't remember my name half the time, Nia said. But she remembers I'm supposed to be smart. Tells me every time I visit. They sat together while their mothers talked. Fatima's memory fading in and out, but her joy constant. The fund, Victoria said after a while. First grants go out next month. 42 schools, supplies, artist visits, teacher stipends, student scholarships. That's real impact. It's a start. Victoria pulled out her phone. Showed Nia the grant applications they'd approved. And I'm teaching now. Community college on the south side. Art history and ethics. Trying to remember why I loved art before it became about status. How is it? Terrifying. Humbling. The students don't let me get away with anything. Victoria smiled. It's perfect. Nia's phone buzzed. Email from Dr. Harlan. First compliance review complete. Found 3 questionable donations from last fiscal year. Need your analysis. This is exactly why we hired you. She smiled, typed back, on it Monday. Send files. The Art Institute position, Victoria asked. Everything I forgot I was good at. Tracing money, spotting fraud, protecting institutions from people who think wealth makes them untouchable. Nia paused. And teaching younger staff how to do the same. Sharing what I know so the next person doesn't have to spend 6 years invisible. You're building something. We both are. They watched their mothers plan to recreate the Kenwood mural. 2 teachers rediscovering a shared vision even as memory failed. I don't know if this is redemption, Victoria said quietly. I don't know if I get that. It's not redemption. Nia said it's reconciliation with your mother, with the values you forgot, with the community you came from. That's harder than redemption. It requires showing up every day and doing the work even when nobody's watching. I'll show up, Victoria promised every day, and watching their mothers together, Nia believed her. 6 months later, Nia stood at the front of a conference room at the Art Institute presenting to a room full of museum compliance officers from across the country. The Corporate Transparency Act changed everything, she said, pulling up a slide showing the FinCEN database interface. Before January 2024, shell companies could hide beneficial owners indefinitely. Now they have to disclose the actual humans who control them. That transparency is the key to catching sophisticated fraud. She clicked to the next slide, a diagram showing circular provenance fraud. Look for patterns. Art selling between entities registered to the same address. Wire transfers that circle back to source accounts. Appraisals completed impossibly fast. And always check formation dates against transaction dates. If an LLC was created weeks before a major sale, that's a red flag. A hand went up. So, how do you know what's legitimate appreciation versus artificial inflation? Auction comparables. Nia said, real sales to real buyers, not private sales between related parties. Check Christie's, Sotheby's, Phillips. Compare similar works by the same artist from the same period. The data exists. You just have to know where to look. After the presentation, 3 museums offered her consulting contracts. 2 major donors asked if she'd review their planned gifts before they finalized them. 1 journalist asked for an interview about her journey from IRS analyst to Maid to compliance officer. She declined the interview, said yes to the consulting work. That evening, she came home to find Jamal cooking dinner while Aisha did homework at the kitchen table and Lila drew pictures at the counter. "How was the presentation?" Jamal asked, kissing her cheek. "Good. Really good." Nia set down her bag. "I got offered 3 consulting contracts. You taking them?" "2 of them. The third conflicted with family dinner nights, and I'm not missing those anymore." Aisha looked up from her algebra. "Mom, my teacher asked if you'd come speak to our class about careers in finance. Your middle school wants a guest speaker on forensic accounting. She said you're the perfect example of how knowledge matters more than job titles. That you were brilliant whether you were scrubbing floors or catching fraud." Nia felt her eyes burn. "I'd love to." Lila held up her latest drawing. Another stick figure. Another graduation gown. But this time there were 2 figures. One in the gown, one in a maid's uniform. Both labeled mommy. Both labeled smart because you were smart both times. Lila explained. "The uniform didn't change you." Nia pulled her youngest into a hug. "No, baby, it didn't." Her phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. "Fun celebration tomorrow at Dunbar High School. First mural installation complete. Students painted Faces of Excellence 2.0. Our mothers will be there. Hope you can make it." "We'll be there." Nia typed back. "All of us." She looked around her kitchen at Jamal stirring sauce, at Aisha solving equations, at Lila creating art that saw truth more clearly than most adults. 6 months ago, she'd been scrubbing marble floors, believing she'd never matter again. Now she was teaching museums how to protect themselves, raising daughters who understood that dignity didn't come from titles, and working with a woman who'd learned that excellence without integrity was just performance. The ruined drawing still sat on her desk at work, preserved now in a shadow box frame. A reminder that being dismissed doesn't make you dismissible. That expertise doesn't disappear when people refuse to see it. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remember who you are when everyone else has forgotten. Her phone buzzed again. "Alex Kim, new case, real estate fraud, 50 million inflated valuations. Need your analysis. Interested?" Nia smiled. Typed back, "Send the files." I'll take a look because she was still a forensic accountant. Still someone who knew how to read fraud like poetry. Still someone who refused to stay silent when powerful people thought they were untouchable. The only difference was that now everyone could see her and she intended to make sure they never forgot it.